Today we'll start our series of lectures over pulmonary ventilation. And I do use the word ventilation, although you may have heard or sometimes used respiration. I use ventilation. It is the process of exchanging air with the environment. So breathing in and out, inspiration, expiration, brings air into the lung, breathes air out. Now, one of the roles of ventilation is for us to bring in oxygen into the body, which will load onto the blood and remove carbon dioxide from the body, from the blood. Ventilation also plays a role in acid-base balance through the buffering equation. And the way we describe how much you're breathing each minute is minute ventilation, V subscript E, the E standing for expired. If you're in the exercise business, you look at the expired ventilation. If you're in the pulmonary business, you may look at inspired rather than expired. They're not exactly the same because the amount of oxygen we remove from the air is not exactly the same as the amount of carbon dioxide that we put back in. Pulmonary ventilation. We'll talk about what it is, why it's important, and how we quantify it. Minute ventilation is the product of the frequency of breathing, also known as RR, the respiratory rate, the product of the frequency of breathing and the tidal volume. Tidal volume, T-I-D-A-L, tidal volume, just like the tide. It comes in, it goes out, it comes in, it goes out. Tidal volume. I've given you some resting values here and some maximal exercise values. And these are very much size dependent upon the size of the person. And we won't learn any other numbers other than these ballpark general numbers for the typical 70-kilogram man. At rest, we exchange 6 liters of air per minute. We breathe approximately 12 times a minute, which means the amount of air in each breath is half a liter or 500 milliliters per breath. In an exercise test where we have a person exercise harder and harder and harder, or if we measure their ventilation during a simulated race where they run 800 meters or row for 8 minutes, we might see ventilation up around 150 liters per minute, respiratory rate 50 breaths, and tidal volume about 3 liters. Now, the values on the right-hand side of the equation are optimal values, not maximal values. You can breathe faster than 50 breaths per minute. It would be like panting. And you can have a tidal volume greater than 3 liters per minute. Big, deep breath in, deep breath out, more than 3 liters. The problem is, if you are breathing in 5 liters and out 5 liters, it takes so long that you wouldn't be able to breathe more than 10 times a minute. So this product, 50 times 3, is the optimal balance of rate and depth of breathing to give you the highest possible sustainable ventilation. Now clearly, if you're a young woman with a mass of 50 kilos and a height of 1.5 meters, your maximal minute ventilation might only be 100 liters per minute. Whereas if you are a 110 kilogram man who stands 1.90 meters, your value could easily be 200 liters per minute. So very much dependent upon size. In exercise, we see an increase in ventilation. We just saw that on the previous slide. We see an increase in ventilation. We have to exchange air faster each minute because we're trying to extract more oxygen and get rid of more carbon dioxide. I'm showing here 3 responses, one to moderate intensity exercise, one to heavy, one to severe or extreme. In each case, you see that before exercise, that dashed line, before exercise, ventilation is steady, and then before the exercise starts, there's a slight increase in ventilation. And we call that the anticipatory response. Then you can see, regardless of the intensity, ventilation increases rapidly, and then the increase becomes more gradual, and at least in moderate and heavy intensity exercise, we have a steady state. A steady state has implications in exercise physiology. It means not just that the one thing you're looking at here stays level, but that in general, all the other functions in the body are staying level. So your heart rate might be expected to be staying level, your oxygen uptake staying level, your pH staying level. So a steady state is more than just one variable. All right. We know that we breathe more in exercise. We'd like to know why. What are the things that happen that will make you breathe faster or deeper? And on this slide, we're talking about things that, if they happen, they will cause you to breathe more. In the lower right-hand corner, just a little reminder about some of the abbreviations we'll be using. The uppercase P stands for partial pressure. It's how we express how much of a particular molecule like oxygen, carbon dioxide, is in a gas. So it's like the concentration. We talk about the concentration of sodium in a liquid. We talk about the partial pressure of oxygen in a gas. The lowercase p, and in this it means the negative log of the concentration. The negative log of the concentration, in this case, it's the negative log of the concentration of hydrogen ions, so it's our measure of acidity. And a low value below 7 means you are acidic. A value above 7 means we're not acidic, more alkalotic. Now, why would these three things cause you to breathe more? Look at the first and the third. An increase in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, lowercase subscript a, arteries, in the arteries. So we're seeing more carbon dioxide than normal in the arteries. Arteries leaving the heart and lung. Third one, decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries. So what we're saying is there's more carbon dioxide than expected as blood returns to the body. Well, the job of the heart and lungs is to get rid of that carbon dioxide. So apparently they're not doing their job. We're going to have to breathe more. Decrease in PaO2, reduction in the amount of oxygen. Lungs aren't doing their job. We have to breathe more. And we have receptors, chemoreceptors, which monitor the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the arterial blood to tell us if the lungs are doing their job. So these are feedback responses. Now, the middle one requires a little more thought. If the arterial blood becomes acidic, that will drive us to breathe more. I've shown here the buffering equation, or Dr. Hill's favorite equation. And what you see is on the left-hand side, the hydrogen ions reflecting acidity, the bicarbonate buffer. The bicarbonate buffer works by hiding, if you will, those hydrogen ions in the form of carbonic acid, H2CO3. And the unique aspects of this buffering system is that this carbonic acid can be broken down into water and carbon dioxide, two harmless products. Harmless in that water is harmless, and carbon dioxide in the blood can be breathed out. So, if we have an excess of hydrogen ions, let's start at the left of this equation. If you have an excess of hydrogen ions Glycolysis is going on. You're producing lots of hydrogen ions from the lactic acid. We're going to do more buffering. We're going to produce more carbonic acid. So I'm moving across to the right. If we produce more carbonic acid, more of it is going to break down into water and carbon dioxide. We're going to have more carbon dioxide in the blood. If we breathe more, then we're going to pull the carbon dioxide out of the blood. So we're going to be removing carbon dioxide from the blood, and then we'll be replacing it by breaking down more carbonic acid, and then we'll be replacing that carbonic acid by hiding more of those free hydrogens, which are what does the damage, in the form of carbonic acid. So we say that we're pulling the reaction to the right. By breathing more, we get rid of the carbon dioxides, so we pull the reaction to the right and reduce the number of free hydrogen ions. Now you may want to pause and think about that and go back and play this part over again, but it's very important to see and to appreciate why an increase in hydrogen ions causes an increase in carbon dioxide. In fact, some people consider that measures of pH and pCO2 are redundant. If the pH is low, if you've got lots of hydrogen ions, you're going to have more carbon dioxides. But you should see why it makes sense for the body to ventilate more, to breathe more, because of this acidity. Okay, make sure you appreciate that equation and make sure you can understand why each of these three factors, if they occur, will cause you to breathe faster and deeper. On the next slide, we'll talk about, do they actually happen? Well, partial pressure of carbon dioxide does not increase in the arterial blood during exercise. PaO2 does not drop in most cases. There's some unique populations we'll talk about where it does, but in general, PaO2 is maintained. And the pH doesn't drop unless you're talking severe and extreme intensity exercise. So although if these things happen, they will make you breathe more, you're pretty hard pressed to say, oh, that's why you breathe more in exercise. How can you say that? They don't happen. Okay, step back. We had anticipatory responses. That's not feedback. And these PaCO2, pH, PO2 all operate by feedback. But we have an anticipatory response. We have a rapid response. You are breathing faster. Before anything can go wrong that would be detected, and then through feedback to the brain would cause you to breathe more. In addition, there's a rapid drop after exercise. Anything that was different, like if you were acidic and you said, oh, that's why I'm breathing more. Well, after exercise, you're going to stay acidic for a while, and yet your ventilation drops rapidly back towards normal. Well, especially the anticipatory response, but all three of these together suggest not feedback control, but neural control in the form of a feed-forward mechanism. In other words, when you say, I'm going to go for a run, your brain sends out a series of messages, which include move your left leg, move your right leg, move your left leg, move your right leg, swing your arms, and breathe more. Now, there probably is some feedback. And in the lower right-hand corner, I'm showing you the bicycle built for two. And when we talk about reflexes and receptors and joint receptors, we discuss how joint receptors may in part be responsible for modifying the ventilatory response. And I've also noted here that the overall ventilatory response seems to be enhanced through training. And I don't mean that you breathe more with training. That can happen. But I mean the control is enhanced. Let me give you an example. Usually in class I say, who has ever experienced second wind? And second wind to a physiologist means, oh, I've been running for 5 or 6 or 8 minutes and all of a sudden, wow, it just seems easier. I'm not talking about it's the fourth quarter and the coach kicks you in the butt and you go, yeah, I got my second wind. That's not physiological second wind. So who's gone out and run, and after a few minutes you just go, ah, this feels much better. Okay, the people who are supposed to say, yeah, I've experienced that, are supposed to be the ones who don't run very often. Whereas the people, on the cross-country team or people who run every day are supposed to go, no, I just don't get that. Well, if that's the response I get, here's the explanation. Billy Bob never runs. He goes for a run. He doesn't know how fast to breathe. He starts running along and he's just breathing too much. Well, he's hyperventilating. It's uncomfortable. So his brain says, oh, you're breathing too much. So he slows down. This is me breathing not enough. And his brain's going, oh my God, we're not getting enough oxygen. We got too much carbon dioxide. You got to breathe more. So he breathes more. And then he's breathing too much. And then he slows it down. He's breathing too little. And finally, he figures it out. And he hits a nice steady state. And he goes, oh, that's better. Okay, that was Billy Bob. Sam runs with Billy Bob. He runs every day. As they run out the door together, Sam's body goes, ooh, 8 minute per mile pace. Boom. Here's how much I should breathe. That's how much he breathes. He never has the period of breathing too much, breathing too little, breathing too much, breathing too little. His brain has a real clear feed forward message. Here's how much you should breathe. So he doesn't feel bad, so he never feels second wind. And here's a question that you'll see a few times. Does ventilation limit performance, or does ventilation limit VO2 max? Does ventilation limit the amount of oxygen that we can use? Well, from the previous slide, you saw that in severe intensity exercise, and you may want to go back and look at it, in severe intensity exercise, the ventilation is increasing all the way up to exhaustion. VO2 reached its max and leveled off. So what it looks like is ventilation could have kept increasing if you hadn't stopped. So you didn't stop because you weren't breathing enough. The other way around, you didn't breathe more because you stopped. So just from that previous slide, you're going to say, well, it doesn't look like ventilation is a limiting factor. Now on this slide, what is the job of ventilation? To make sure that we get rid of carbon dioxide and bring in oxygen. Or to put it negatively, ventilation makes sure that PaCO2 does not increase and that PaO2 does not drop. And in fact, PaCO2 does not increase and PaO2 does not drop. Therefore, the lungs are doing their job even when you fall off the back of the treadmill. So again, it certainly appears that ventilation does not limit performance. So in summary, we've talked about ventilation, factors that could increase it, and then what actually does increase it during exercise. And as usual, physiology is a thing of beauty, and the buffering equation is really neat. Next time we'll talk about the specifics of oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange in the lung as oxygen moves from the alveolar air into the capillary blood and carbon dioxide from the blood into the alveolar air. Until next time.